Welcome to the Underground, the Steel City Underground, the black and gold standard for Pittsburgh Steelers coverage. Now, here are your hosts, Brian E. Roach and Christina Rivers.
Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of the Steel City Underground podcast. I am Brian E. Roach, the host who does not like toast, and I still don't like toast, and as you all well know at this point, I couldn't eat it even if I did, because I'm on a no-carb diet. And that is just the beginnings of the fantastic information we're going to share tonight after the Steelers have pulled off a come-from-behind 27-14 victory over the visiting Miami Dolphins. And, you know, my normal compatriot, my brother from another mother, the man who thinks he's Batman and for some reason is picturing me in his head as Robin, which really frightens me, and I hope he never uses that analogy again. He's not available tonight. You know, the other gentleman, our younger brother from another mother, who decided this was past his bedtime. And, you know, the old man who's been up since 4 a.m. this morning, it's midnight now. And, you know, I had to call on our faithful friend and wondrous human being, the wonderful and beautiful Tina Rivers, to join us tonight because only us old folks can hang out. Now, you're not really old. I'm old. You're not really old. But Tina, thank you for coming aboard the podcast.
I will accept I am among the top oldest in our Steel City Underground team. I will take on that mantle and say that I'm ashamed of all you young pups that work with us that had to get your binky and your blankies and head to bed while Brian and I are still lit.
That's right. We're still lit. And I went to the gym. It was chest and back day. And I went to the gym at 6 a.m. this morning after getting up at 4 a.m. and driving to work and all that crap. And I'm still up. Daggone it. Anyway, that's because we have reason to be happy. We have reason to be excited, although it didn't start out looking like that was going to be the case. But at the end of the day, the Steelers come away with a 27-14 victory, scoring 27 unanswered points after the Dolphins had sprinted to a 14-0 lead. So I feel compelled to start this podcast with something Joe and I usually finish the podcast with, which is the ever-popular Grown-Ass Man Awards. And to do so, Tina, I would like you to consider your Grown-Ass Man Awards for the offense and the defense. I'll let you start things out on the offensive side with who you think deserves a Grown-Ass Man Award.
Okay. Now, this is a little bit of a tougher week to just pull one name out and say, absolutely, this is the person that should be crowned. Because there were several players that had what I would call key plays.
You can have more than one. You can have more than one.
Well, I mean, the contested catch by Juju Smith-Schuster, grabbing it and coming away with it and getting into the end zone for a touchdown. You have to kind of give a little credit to Mason Rudolph for putting it right where Juju could grab it, and at the same time give credit to Juju for saying, you know what, you've had your hands all over me all game, I'm going to take this ball away. But my Grown-Ass Man Award goes to James Conner for getting up from a play after nearly rushing for 150 yards, nearly 150 yards on the ground, and coming up from a play and having the biggest divot out of Heinz Field turf I have ever seen stuck in his face mask. If that doesn't say hard-nosed football and grown-ass man, I don't know what does.
I think he was running off to the sideline going, "Look, Ma, I'm Ryan Fitzpatrick." Yeah, that was everybody had a lot of fun with that divot.
I nicknamed it hashtag turf face.
Turf face.
Whereas
yeah.
turf toe is bad, turf face is not a bad thing.
Yeah, look, I have to give it to James Conner too. 23 carries, 145 yards, a touchdown, 6.3 average. Mr. Conner was definitely toting the rock some tonight. And with Benny Snell going down with a knee, which we don't know the severity of yet, and Conner going out at the end of the game with a shoulder, but you knew he was going to bear the brunt of that load. He did a good job doing so. As Mike Tomlin would say, it was needed, it was required, and it's much appreciated. But he did an excellent job. I kind of have to give a shout out to Rosie Nix, and not that he did anything tremendously spectacular, but just his presence helped open up this run game, getting that fullback back in there to help pave the way a little bit. I'm not quite ready to give him the grown-ass man award. And look, there's a slew of people who are going to, out there in the Twitterverse, who are going to give me an unending string of grief if I do not call out James Washington for the block that got Deontay Spencer into the end zone on that 45-yard touchdown play. Because, to be fair, James Washington annihilated.
Johnson, right?
Huh?
Isn't it? It was Deontay Johnson, wasn't it?
Didn't I say that, or did I say Deontay Spencer? I don't know.
Spencer,
but
I know it's confusing because they spell their name the same, so...
Yeah, but one's not even on the team anymore,
yeah.
so that's just sad. Look, I am old, and I've been up since 4, so cut me some slack. Deontay Johnson is who I meant.
I am.
Yes.
I'm just helping you.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate it.
Is your co-host not supposed to help? Yes.
But James Washington leveled the guy that he blocked out of in that end zone, and it was a Hines Wardish block. So I will grant that in that moment, James Washington showed a little grown-ass man-atude, fortitude, but I can't really say he's been a grown-ass man because he caught one pass on 6 targets. Now, admittedly, that's not all his fault, and we'll talk about that as we get along. Juju certainly gets credit for being a grown-ass man, in my view. On the defensive side of the ball, and no, just in case anybody's wondering, I'm not giving Mason Rudolph a grown-ass man award. He did a fine job, and I'm happy, but I have some issues. So here is on the defensive side of the ball, there is the grown-ass man who really took this game over in the fourth quarter. That would be T.J. Watt. He basically just said, I am tired of whatever the hell has been going on, and I'm going to sack Ryan Fitzpatrick, and I'm going to take the ball away from him, and then I'm going to slide in the end zone on my butt and have a lot of fun. So he was definitely a grown-ass man. Cam Hayward did his normal grown-ass manedness at a variety of times, being disruptive, being in the backfield, got a sack, and I just like to say Cam Hayward is a grown-ass man. So those are the 2 that I'm picking out, even though I feel like there's a couple others that could be considered. Tina, what did you see?
Well, I wore my number 90 Color Rush jersey because I was hoping that TJ Watt, that his abdominal injury that was just consistently nagging him, that he'd be like, I don't need abdominal muscles, I'm going to play anyway. And when he did, I was like excited because I knew he was going to dial up a lot of pressure, which is, I was so glad to see him come away with the strip sack. And then to seal it off at the end of the game, basically just pin the ball in Fitzpatrick's hand as he sacked him. And he comes up with this big smile on his face. And just for that, he gets a grown-ass man award. But I think a lot of fans will probably leave you a message if you don't mention Minkah Fitzpatrick and the 2 interceptions that he had tonight against the former team.
You're right, they will. And I'm going to say his name correctly, Minkah, and agree with you.
Is it not Minkah?
No, it is Minkah. I call him Minkah. I don't know why. but he's Minkah, and
That's
Minkah
funny.
is correct. And maybe it's just because I'm old and I can't see. I don't know what the reason is. But yeah, Minkah had a tremendous game. in the right places at the right times. I know people are going to complain about the second interception, basically because it put the Steelers at the 3, and if he just bats that ball down, you don't know where they're going to have it because that would have been a heck of a punt. But the Dolphins punter had done a good job of pinning them back there a couple times in the game. So I'll take it. I like the fact, and I will say, Booger. I don't give Booger McFarland much credit for being anything other than a big giant booger, but I will say that he had a point when he said the nice thing about an interception versus a punt is it gives the defense a feel good, and it gives momentum to the team, and it kind of felt like that was the case. And I agree with him, that getting that turnover, it makes a difference as opposed to just a punt that, because then if a punt gets downed inside the 10-yard line, that's a big boost for the other team. Whereas we intercepted the ball, we took it away from you. Ha, 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 we imposed our will. And so I agree with that. So yeah, Minkah can be a grown-ass man. Sure, why not? I like that. And I agree with it for the most part.
And I'm sure that there's going to be people that, they'll bring up that exact point, was that the smartest play to make or not? And in the moment, if you're playing at full speed in the NFL and the ball's coming your way, are you thinking, are you slowing down time and thinking, let's play chess here. If I do this, this will be the result. Or in the speed of the game, in the heat of the moment, and wanting to get the momentum, you grab the interception. I just think it's kind of a natural progression, natural move for the defensive back to make. And he'd already made one interception in the game, and it did change the momentum, so why not grab the ball?
Yeah. So let's just review what we have here, because I agree with you. The Steelers started off anything but fast. Let's just put it that way. The Steelers kick off. The Dolphins get the ball first. The defense does a good job, forces a 3-and-out on a punt. Mason gets the ball and pretty much just gives it right back in an interception. The Dolphins take that interception, drive it in 26 yards for a touchdown. The Steelers get the ball back, start a drive that seems to have some momentum, end up turning it over on downs, and the Dolphins take that 68 yards in for a second touchdown, putting them up 14-0 in the first quarter. The Dolphins, who had not scored more than 10 points in the first half of any game this season, or maybe of all their games combined this season, I'm not sure which is the case, and I'd have to look it up, but it's probably the latter, have now got 14 points, and the Steelers are down 14-0. People are starting to light bonfires in Heinz Field, getting ready to burn the place down, as Joe and I said they were well and able to do if, in fact, the Steelers lost this game. I
posted on Twitter a picture of a volcano because I figured, somebody's going to burn the stadium down tonight if this isn't a win.
Yeah, and that brings me to Mason. We talked about this both after the hit that knocked him out and in the pregame. How would he react? And while he said all the right things, Mason did not look comfortable at the beginning of this game. He didn't look like he was seeing things well, to the point. Now, I was forced to listen to most of the first quarter of this game on the radio, the Monday Night Football broadcast on Westwood One. And let me just tell you, Kurt Warner, he's fine. I got no issues with Kurt Warner. I can't remember who the guy is that is the play-by-play announcer, but according to him, every single catch is made at the belt. And Benny Snell has been the most impressive rookie the Steelers have had this season. These are things the man said. And it made me long.
Doing like a positive broadcast.
Well, it made me long for Chris Collingsworth. Not because this guy was negative, but he was so stupid, It annoyed me. So I'm listening to this, and, on the way here, and I'm thinking to myself, what is going on? And, he then brought up the statement that the Jets quarterback Darnold made about seeing ghosts, and they kept going on and on about maybe Mason is seeing ghosts, and now he's seeing Sam Darnold's ghosts, and he doesn't know what he's doing, and he's losing it, and he's throwing the ball in the wrong places. And look, I couldn't see most of these passes firsthand, but it's certainly, I mean, because he almost had a second ball picked off. He had the one interception, which when I went back and looked at the replay of it was just an awful decision, trying to force the ball to Juju.
Yeah.
And he definitely looked unsettled in the first half. Now, he did, obviously, he got himself back together a bit. But here's the thing I noticed. When Mason's throwing the ball to the sidelines, he does a fairly decent job. When he's trying to throw a fade or an over-the-shoulder or a back-shoulder pass on the side of the field, for the most part, those passes look okay, minus the first interception, which was to the side of the field. But most of the passes, other than the one slant to Deontay Johnson, hey, I got it right that time, and I think one to Juju, the passes that he would throw in the middle of the field seemed like they were just off target a lot of this game. And it's that inconsistency. And watching his mechanics through the entire game, he was throwing off, and I think the professor mentioned this in a tweet, he's throwing off his back foot a lot. Only on a couple balls did he really plant correctly, and throw with some force. He's throwing low to guys, he's throwing behind guys, and maybe it's rust. Maybe it's just a young guy trying to come back from getting his bell rung. I don't know.
Well, I don't think it was those things. And watching the game, not that I'm putting you down for listening because you had no control.
Yep.
But watching the game, there's a lot to be said about the poor play of the offensive line. At least one of the passes, I believe one of the interceptions, Maurkice Pouncey was almost in Rudolph's lap. And it really surprised me because we've talked about how good the offensive line is and has been at getting both Mason Rudolph and Devlin Hodges when they've played, the time that they need and the protection. And for some reason, the offensive line came out really bad in this game, and so a lot of the mechanics. It wasn't that Rudolph could set his foot, and I'm not defending that you should throw a bad pass, but to be realistic, you can't set your feet if you're having to shuffle because your offensive line is on top of you either.
No,
and your analysis, as far as not being on target, was correct too. He wasn't leading his receivers. They were having to stop and to turn and adjust their body to try to make a play on the ball. And unfortunately, the Dolphins were playing close. A lot of it was close man coverage, and there just wasn't the room to adjust. So, your analysis on that was pretty spot on, other than the fact that initially that the offensive line was not doing well.
Yeah, the offensive line has been underwhelming this year. This was not a good game for Maurkice Pouncey. I know he got a couple holding calls. DeCastro had, I think, a false start. We had holding calls on the outside on Zach Banner, I think, or on maybe even on Villanueva. I'm not sure. I'd have to go back and look.
McDonald definitely drew
McDonald
one.
had one,
yeah, McDonald
I know.
Drew one.
Yeah, I know McDonald drew one. They have not, they did an okay job with when they would do outside runs. And a couple of times they opened up some nice holes up the middle, but a lot of the runs that James Conner, did have, were also stuffed. And this is by a team that is not, remember, the Dolphins are the worst rush defense in the league. So, you kind of expect James Conner to be able to go off. But there, like I said, there were times when we just were not imposing our will. Even though Mike Tomlin said in his post game that we won both sides of the ball in the trenches. The offensive line won and the defensive line won. I will agree with the defensive line side, and I think the offensive line had moments where they played well, but overall, they should have been much more dominant in this game, I felt. And I agree with you. You know, there were times when they didn't give Mason the time that he could have used. There were also times when Mason needed to get rid of the ball a little quicker. There is still an issue with separation at times with our receivers not getting truly open, because there's a couple of times Mason was just looking and looking and looking and looking, and then finally has to dump the ball off to, you know, somebody out of the backfield or a short pass to Vance McDonald that's like for a yard because he's got no place to go with the ball. Or, you know, and that's hard to see on TV because you don't really see the full field. So you can't see what all the coverages are. But, you know, so there's a chance maybe there are guys open that he's not seeing and we're not seeing because it's not visible. But I just, it was not, even towards the end of the game, where, you know, I felt like they could have taken this game and closed it down a lot sooner, because I think the last 2 drives or 3 drives, they had a 3-and-out. Essentially, they had the ball at the Miami 23 after TJ's strip sack. They only end up getting a field goal. And then, you know, the last set of series they had, they gained 8 yards. Ended up being -2 because they had a -10 for penalty. So their series were -2, -1, and 9 to end the game. And that's not very good.
Yeah, so it's almost like they reverted back to the beginning of the game.
Yeah, exactly. They had 3 drives of negative yards. The first drive and then 2 of the last 3. So while they had, I mean, the best drive, Mason, that they put together was after Minkah's interception, you know, that had him at the 3. They drove essentially 97 net yards and got a touchdown. So, you know, that was the best drive they had. It was a nice long drive. It was 7 minutes and 47 seconds long. They looked pretty much cohesive. They even overcame a 10-yard holding penalty on that drive. So it was nice, but it's the lack of consistency with the offense that still concerns me. And even though I think they finally got it going, you know, Steelers Nation was not a happy group at the end of the first half. You know, they just
I think
not
a lot of
at
people
all.
I think they were chugging Pepto-Bismol in their Jameson, because I think they had indigestion after watching those 14 points go up on the board. I think it was just like, no, please, no, not another, not another game, not another week like this. And so, you know, it is kind of amazing that they look so bad. And then after Fitzpatrick's interception, they drive 97 yards in 12 plays. And it took 7 minutes and 47 seconds off the game clock to get the lead, which, if they can drive 97 yards, why can't they do it consistently? And that's going to be something that Steelers Nation is probably going to keep asking all season. Why can't they be consistent?
Yeah. And I, you know, it's part of it is learning. Part of it is the offensive line not having the best year that they've had. It's been called out a lot. People are wondering if it's Munchak. People are wondering what else it is. Maybe they're just getting older. I mean, look, Ramon Foster left the game with a concussion, and he's an older guy. Pouncey is getting up there in years. So you do have an aging offensive line, and maybe we're starting to see them on the decline, and the Steelers are going to have to address that as they move forward. I will say, the defense made it interesting at times. They certainly didn't pick the offense up after they had turned that ball over in the first half, and they got off to another slow start, allowing a fairly long drive. But then after that, they basically said, yeah, I think we're done with this nonsense. and allowed only like a drive of 29, 15, -1, no yards, 22, 34, -6, 40, and 1. And essentially, again, becoming a turnover machine and a sack machine. I think they had 4 sacks. They had 2 interceptions, 2 fumble recoveries. They forced a 3rd fumble that the Dolphins managed to keep. They played the way that we've seen them play, and you never really, once the Steelers got the lead, you didn't really feel like, oh no, it's gonna get out of hand again. They're gonna let them back in. At least I didn't. The defense was playing up to their standards for the majority of the second half of the game, which is good to see. And the way that they're creating turnovers, man, it's crazy. They just continue to add those turnovers up, and that's going to be important as they move through this. Because the upcoming games, the next 2 games are probably 2 of the toughest games left on their schedule with the Colts and the Rams, both of whom have at times looked good and at times look very beatable. The Colts probably should have lost the game to the Broncos, this Sunday. So that's a team that you might have thought, hey, they're going to come in here and go to town against this team, but that's a beatable team. And the Rams, one week they look great, and the other week Jared Goff throws 14 interceptions. So these are both games I think that are going to be winnable coming up, and this is a chance for the Steelers with this homestand to turn this season around if they can. I think the defense is up to that task. But man, I'm still, even with 27 points being scored, I'm still concerned about the offense.
Well, and you look at those 2 teams that you just mentioned, they're suffering from kind of the same thing that the Steelers are this season. It's something that the longtime Steelers fans aren't necessarily used to. If you look back at like some of the teams in the 80s, some of the 90s teams, they were, like cardiac kids, they were always, oh man, they've got it. All they have to do is put it away and then something would happen. And I don't know what the problem, I don't know if it's really a problem, but there seems to be kind of a trend over several years in the Steelers' history of playing down to opponents that they statistically should own. And it was kind of the case tonight in the Miami game. At the beginning, you saw them kind of playing down to the Dolphins when they should have been really taking full control of the game. And the Rams and the Colts are kind of in that same, what is our identity? They've let teams get back into games. They've shot themselves in the foot and lost games. And the Steelers can't afford to do the same thing that they did tonight against those 2 teams if they want to put, stack wins on top of wins. They just can't. They can't look at these other teams and go, well, these games are winnable. They have to approach these games as they're not just winnable, they're must-win games. We've got to get these wins stacked on top of each other because, you're running out of time.
Absolutely.
But are the Rams and the Colts, the top teams competitively in the NFL? No, they're not. But they're as much of a 50-50 coin toss right now as maybe the Steelers are, and that is concerning.
Yeah,
the Steelers need to hopefully build off of the identity they developed tonight and say, hey, we're not going to let any more teams do this to us, and we're not going to do it to ourselves. We're going to take control of the game and play the way we want to play and move forward, or it's going to be a disaster. And I don't like to be down, but I've been on some roller coaster rides over the years with the Steelers.
Absolutely. When you look at the Colts, the Colts opened up the season losing to the Chargers. The Chargers are clearly not a team that most people are fearing right now. And they lost in overtime to the Chargers. Then they beat the Titans 19-17. They beat the Falcons, who flat out stink. They lose to the Raiders, They did manage 2 quality wins after that. They beat the Chiefs 19-13, but the Chiefs probably are not the Chiefs that we're used to. And the Chiefs' defense is not tremendous, and yet they could only manage 19 points against them. They beat the Texans 30-23. That's a quality win. And then they beat the Broncos once more. Nobody's fearing the Broncos right now. So, when you look at even the wins, they've got two nice quality wins in there against teams that do have winning records, and they've lost to a couple of not great teams, and they've won some of the games they should have. But you don't necessarily look at them. I mean, the highest point total they had was 30. They've managed that once. But they've got scores like 15, 19 twice. They've only scored 19 points. It's not really a prolific offense. So, I think Indianapolis is a game the Steelers can handle, but they've got to avoid the things. And far be it from me to disagree with you, fount of knowledge that you are.
Oh, that's okay. I am not, I will not say that my opinions can never be wrong.
But I don't agree, and Joe and I have stated this many times, I don't agree with the concept that the Steelers play down to other teams. I do agree that they have had games where at the moment it looks like they're playing down to a lesser opponent, but when you have hindsight and go back on those games, you end up finding out that was actually a pretty good team. That's not the case with this team. The Dolphins are not a good team, and nobody's going to come back at the end of the year and go, they're a good team. But, you can't count on Mason throwing an absolutely atrocious interception 2 plays into this game and say that's because the Steelers are playing down. That's just Mason doing something boneheaded.
Well, there I agree. I agreed there.
Yeah, and while I think the defense was maybe a little bit on its heels. No, go ahead. With getting...
No, that's what I was going to say.
You're going to say that? Is that what you were going to say?
Oh, I was just going to say I agree. The defense was a little bit on its heels. It came out a little flat. And with the turnovers, Miami took advantage of it. So it's not necessarily playing down as not playing to your full potential of what you really should be playing at, and maybe playing a little bit too relaxed. So in some ways, I guess we're agreeing to disagree.
Yes.
Because I think it's
probably right.
I think it's a perception thing. It's not necessarily a statistics thing. It's kind of a perception, a feeling that you get watching the games.
Yeah. So I want to look at the Rams as well, because I didn't do that yet. But so the Colts game, as I said, I think is a winnable game, and I don't see anything looking at that team that terrifies me. The Rams managed to put up a whopping 24 points against the Bengals. Woohoo! They've beaten the Falcons, who, by the way, stink. They've beaten the Browns, who, by the way, aren't that good. They did beat the Saints, but that's a Saints team that was without Drew Brees at the time, and it was Teddy Bridgewater's first start. And they beat the Panthers early on. They lost to the Buccaneers. 55 points they gave up to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They lost to the Seahawks by a point, and they lost to the 49ers by 13. Again, the Rams, they've got a good team, but they're not as good as they were last year. And playing in Pittsburgh, where they have to take the East Coast trip, the Steelers have a chance. So these next 2 games, I think, are very winnable. And the only downside is we get the Rams off of a bye, right? So the Rams are on the bye next week, and they'll be coming off the bye into Pittsburgh. But I still think they can win both of those games. Now, the thing to, I guess, keep in mind is during those same 2 games, the team that we want to hate, and I have to have conversations with most of the Steelers, SCU backroom people about this, because you're all wrong. And under no circumstances are we rooting for the Ravens to beat the Patriots. No, we are not. I know we'd like to see the Patriots lose, but no, we are not rooting for the Ravens to beat the Patriots.
I think I said, I don't think I, well, maybe I did. I'm trying to think. I think at first I said that no, I did. I said, no, I want the Ravens to beat the Patriots because that would give everyone in the league a guide to how to beat them. But when the professor, Zach Meckler, brought up that, well, it doesn't matter how to beat them if we're losing the division to the Ravens, it was like, that you're right. I don't want to root for the Ravens. Let's let the Patriots go ahead and win that one.
Yeah, in the next 5 games, go ahead.
They can lose the rest of them.
Yeah, the next 5 games they play the Patriots, the Texans, the Rams, and the 49ers. That's a good group of teams. The Bengals are in there too, so okay. But at least it's at Cincinnati this time. And while they did beat the Bengals, it was only 23-17, and that was in Baltimore. So the Bengals have a history of pulling a game off that they shouldn't pull off against the Ravens. But let's assume that they don't beat the Patriots and the Patriots win. And we'll say they beat the Bengals, but maybe they lose to the Texans. Maybe they lose to the Rams because it's in L.A. I don't know what San Francisco is going to be like at that point. At some point, they're going to lose a game, you think, but maybe not. Well, if they lose, even 3 out of those 5 games, right? That puts them right at that moment at 7-5 or something like that, 7-6. I don't know. I got to do math better. Right now they're 5-2. So if they lose 3, that's 5, and if they win 2, they'd be 7-5, right? And if during that same stretch, the Steelers, who will have the games that we talked about with the Colts and the Browns, and then 2 with the Browns and 1 with the Bengals, if they can sweep those division games, which we've been talking about, and pull off 1 more of those games, you're talking about a tie. Where they're both 7-5. So the point is the division is certainly not out of reach, but the Steelers, I think the offense has to become much more consistent than it is. They've got to figure out how to get Mason to use better mechanics so that he's, as you said, he's leading receivers instead of throwing behind receivers, because I think part of the problem is that they figured out they did a great job with Juju tonight, right? Juju was being covered and handled on the outside. They moved him into the slot, and all of a sudden he starts making plays. And, Zach Meckler, the professor, as you said, and I have been saying all season long, Juju's going to make more plays out of the slot than he's going to make on the outside. And if he's not working out there, get him inside, put him on matchups that are going to benefit him, and he will make plays. And he sure as heck did tonight. He had a 100-yard game. That incredible touchdown catch between him and Deontay Johnson. We have some potential tandem there of things that could turn into something. Well,
it actually makes sense when you think about it. If James Washington is your deep threat guy, as they keep promoting him, moving him to the outside forces defenses to say, okay, now wait a second. We've got a guy that we know is a potentially deep threat. He has a rapport with Mason Rudolph because they played together in college. Do we take our double team off Juju, or or should we move it to Washington because he can burn us deep? I think it was very, very intelligent move and adjustment to move Juju to the inside where he can be the slot receiver. Because like you said, he was able to get behind the linebackers into the open field and make some really nice plays.
Yeah, the only thing that James Washington's got to do to get that rep to actually work is he's got to have better stat lines than 1 of 6.
Definitely.
And again, it's not all James Washington's fault. I saw most of the targets to James Washington, and they were not well-thrown balls. Difficult to impossible catches for Washington to have. He did blow at least one of those completely on his own, but there were definitely catches that just the ball was behind him, and he threw it behind Juju a couple times. I feel like we need to see more consistency, and hopefully we will. This is his first game back. Maybe he was just rusty. I didn't agree with the folks who were calling for the Duck to come in. Look, you got to let Mason play this game out. He's the guy that's going to take you through the rest of this season. And you need to, as we've said all along, we need to see whether Mason is the heir apparent. I'm not sold on that yet. I have yet to be convinced by anything I've seen so far that Mason's the guy that's going to continue the legacy of Steelers quarterback play after Ben decides to retire. But he can certainly build himself into a solid backup who can win games, and he's showing that he can do that right now. And I think that's that. If he is that, and then they get they have to draft another quarterback to be the franchise guy down the road, I'm okay with that. We'll see. Maybe he can grow. I mean, this is only his second year, so I mean, I don't want to pick on him. I like Mason. I like some of the things he can do,
and I don't think it was fair to say that he was seeing ghosts.
No, that wasn't fair
either,
at all.
because you're assuming that he's just. If anyone watched Sam Darnold's play during that game, that the ghost reference came up. Mason Rudolph was playing with a vision. Sam Darnold's issue was that he was under so much pressure, he was just lofting the ball into the air and hoping that it didn't land in someone else's hands. There's a big difference. But Mason Rudolph, he's a young guy. He's working with Randy Fichtner, who is there in Pittsburgh primarily because Ben Roethlisberger has a rapport with him. And so they've had to change their offense, and it's going to take a little bit for Mason Rudolph to build that kind of a bond with Randy Fichtner, I think, and you're going to see adjustments.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I just think, I worry a little bit about, his, like I said, his mechanics. I worry a little bit about his consistency. But those are all things that can be worked on and can be improved. And he's at least shown some moxie and has kept the Steelers competitive and won some games, so that we feel like we'll have a chance. I don't have high expectations for this season anymore, and that ended when Ben went out. Regardless of how that Patriots game initially went and how bad everybody essentially looked in that game, I still believe Ben's probably the best quarterback that would be on this team. Now, that being said, my goal for this season is that the pick they traded for Minkah is not a top 10 pick. That's my goal. I would love to make the playoffs, and that would guarantee that that's not a top 10 pick. But I'd like to win the division. I'd like to get into the party. If this defense continues to gel, if Devin Bush continues to grow, if Minkah continues to grow in this defense, you've got a chance that the defense could actually carry them through some games. And with a little luck, who knows? But that's my ultimate goal. My takeaway from this season, when you lose your franchise quarterback, is let's just make sure our top 10, our top pick that we traded away for a guy who I think is well worth the pick, regardless of where it was, is not as good, so that we really win that trade.
You're already looking forward to the 2020 draft, huh?
Well, not really, because we don't have a first round pick, so that first round is going to be really boring. But I like to see what else we can do. I like the fact that they're doing a good job with these younger guys, and you know what? Hey, we didn't call this out, and we need to, because it's monumental. There is something monumental that happened in this game, and I meant to call it out right away, and I let it lapse until we're almost done with the show.
You're talking about...
No, don't give it away. Don't give it away.
I'm not.
It's history making. It's massive.
It's the miracle at Heinz Field.
It is. It's unreal. It finally happened. We can believe in two things. First of all, we didn't get Riveroned. We did once. Yes, and I have to get it in. The refs stink. They still stink. They blew the pass interference call. It was terrible. There was nothing pass interference about that call, and then later on there was one that was clearly pass interference that they didn't call. They stink. I hate them. Okay, I'm done with that. This is the thing we didn't get Riveroned on. Mike Tomlin won a challenge.
I know when Booger announced how long it had been, just the number. I don't know, what was it? I can't remember. Like 139-0. The Steelers hadn't won a challenge.
And you could tell. You could tell. Look, you have to go back and watch this in the game. When Mike Tomlin threw the challenge flag down, and when they took 1,000 years to decide where the ball actually was, and then they placed it, you could tell he thought he lost. He was like, no, he was mad. Because he's snake bitten. Like, he's like, no, not again, and it's gonna be a first down anyway. This is stupid and it stinks, and that's terrible. And the ball wasn't that far; it just wasn't. And then he won the challenge. It wasn't a first down. Now that he was going to win the challenge anyway because they moved the ball, right? So he challenged the spot of the ball and they moved it. Yeah. He was just upset that maybe they were still going to get the first down. So it would have been kind of a half-hearted victory where it's like, yeah, I won the challenge, but it didn't help. But it did. It ended up helping quite a bit, and I gotta say, that monkey is off his back now. He finally won a challenge, and it mattered.
Yeah, he needs to take that challenge flag and put it in like a little acrylic case. The guys take their game ball, and keep those because they're special moments. Tomlin needs to take that challenge flag and put it in his little acrylic case as first challenge won, and then stick it in his desk and lock it away so he doesn't ever have to think about it again.
Absolutely. I'm glad that it's over. Our long Steelers Nation nightmare with challenges has finally ended. Mike Tomlin won a challenge. And if that isn't an indication of the fact that the Steelers were going to win this game, that's as good as it gets. Mike Tomlin wins the challenge. The Steelers win the game. And Tina, I think that's all there is to say about this. So thank you for coming to my rescue and preventing me from doing a video podcast where everyone would have to look at me. And they're all happy that you did that. Because if I had to go solo tonight, it was going to be a video.
And it was going to be I've been up since 4 a.m. and I don't even know how I look kind of video podcast.
Yeah. People would be able to stare at my Jerome Bettis pictures and all my crap in my office. But they'd also have to look at me, which is, not necessarily anybody's favorite thing to do. But I want to give a shout out to Wesley Hickok. He's one of our Twitter followers. He had given the prediction. His name's Wesley Hickok, and he's one of our Twitter guys. And he had given the prediction that Minkah was going to get 2 interceptions, and he did. He got 2, so he nailed that. Most of his other bold predictions were not quite right, but he got that one right. I'm giving myself credit because I gave the bold prediction that James Conner on the last podcast was going to get 150 all-purpose yards, and guess how many he got with the 1 catch and the 145 rushing? 150 all-purpose yards. So, for anybody who was slow on the draw, I did actually use my refs don't stink or the refs stink GIF. I had it loaded up on that review. I knew they were not going to overturn that pass interference, and I knew that they stunk. But I'm glad I only had to use it once. So there's that. So I'll lay off the refs for about 30 seconds.
My favorite part of your GIF is your face popping up at the end. It makes the whole GIF.
Yeah, okay. I agree. I like yelling things. It's that's my old man yells at the cloud yelling face.
I was going to say that's exactly what it reminds me of.
Yeah. All right. So I think that's going to wrap it up for us. It's late. We're goofy, and we need to let this wind down. Thank you all for listening. Please make sure to subscribe, get the bell on, leave some reviews, give us feedback. We love all that stuff. We appreciate you taking the time to listen. Tina, again, appreciate you taking the time to join me this evening. And for everybody out there, as I like to say, it's chaos out there, so be kind.
We would like to thank you for listening and remind our listeners to follow us on social media and our website, www.steelcityunderground.com.